Hello there friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. I find it really interesting how the New Republic Defense Forces seem to have different policies and different responses to different types of pirate attacks, depending on what the target of those pirate attacks actually is. When the world of Navarro was overrun by pirate captain and sentient fauna Gorian Shard, the situation was quite dire on the planet. Arriving on a Cumulus-class Corsair warship, Shard's pirates had overrun what little security was on Navarro and had complete control over the airspace over the capital city. The pirates then proceeded to drive most of the townspeople out into the wilderness. Luckily for them, their High Magistrate Grief Karga does not abandon them, although he could have totally taken an escape pod and escaped. But instead, he leads his people through the desert like Space Moses.
They camp here for a short while. Help will arrive soon. Very soon.
How soon?
Who's coming to help?
How can you be so
I have
sure?
sent a message to the New Republic. Help is on the way.
I don't even think they brought snacks with them. And when Karga talks about help coming, he fails to mention that the message he actually sent to the New Republic was just to a New Republic Ranger, Carson Teva. The old man is a legend and probably single-handedly keeping his sector together with a ragtag squadron of X-Wings and Y-Wings, but his political power is very limited. I mean, why else do you think Carson Teva is posted in the middle of nowhere? And so when he relays that message to Coruscant, he gets no response. He gets no green light to go ahead and attack this pirate menace. Never want to give up so easily, Carson Teva ends up flying to Coruscant himself to deliver the message from Navarro. But he actually runs into new problems and finds out the real reason why the New Republic is not responding.
They have yet to sign the charter. They're not a member planet.
Uh-oh. It's not good.
So one thing about the end of the Galactic Civil War that isn't really explained properly, I think, is the fact that the New Republic doesn't just take over the original territory that the Republic had. They also just don't take over all of the Empire's holdings. Instead, they go through this very arduous process of creating a new charter and having every member world sign it. And naturally, you're going to have worlds like Navarro in the Outer Rim that for one reason or another has not signed the charter yet, or chooses to remain independent. Some planets, like Ryloth, who was kind of tired of larger sovereign nations screwing them over, just chose to stay neutral. So technically speaking, this administrator is right. The New Republic doesn't really have to do anything because Navarro is not a New Republic world.
We can't leave them defenseless.
Of course not. But we have a backlog of requests from member worlds that have priority. I don't even know if we have the resources, especially for pirates.
So the New Republic can't even spare this squadron from Aldafi base, even though this squadron looks pretty relaxed and like they could fit some more missions into their schedule. Now we understand just, how much the New Republic prioritizes worlds like Navarro. Now, in comparison, let's take a look at how the New Republic responds to At-Aten's request for an anti-piracy mission. This way we'll get a better understanding of how galactic politics works and where resources are allocated and for what reasons. At-Aten has clearly not signed any New Republic charter, as it has no idea the original Republic even collapsed. It also has no idea about the Clone Wars, the rise of the Empire, and the Galactic Civil War. What's even more interesting is that when the alarm is set off on At-Aten, it's not some war hero like Carson Teva who's contacting the Republic. It's some random alien collector lady who's not a part of the military or the government. And actually, think about it, the name At-Aten is pretty much viewed by most citizens in the galaxy as a child's fairy tale. Like, most people don't believe that this world actually exists.
Where are you two from?
Aden?
So we have a distress call from an unvetted, sketchy individual who's not a part of the military or the government about a pirate attack on a world that is not a part of the New Republic, a world that potentially doesn't even exist and only exists in children's fairy tale stories. And so what does the New Republic send? Well, a pretty robust strike force. 8 X-Wing T-65Bs by the look of their engines, 2 ASF-01 B-Wing starfighters, and even a CR-90 Corvette. If you think about it, they didn't even send that many fighters to La Nupa when it was under attack by pirates, and that was a world full of extremely rich clients and dignitaries, other types of important people who should have a lot of influence over the New Republic. So clearly the presence or the potential of credits on At-Aten has drawn the attention in the New Republic in ways that almost nothing else can. What's impressive about the New Republic response is that they skipped the whole recon patrol thing, which usually consists of 2 or 3 X-Wings, and went immediately to a complete strike package. During the height of the Galactic Civil War, this amount of firepower was commonly used to run Imperial blockades and deliver aid to besieged allies. which shows us that the New Republic took the situation extremely seriously. Another thing I want to take a closer look at is the ASF-01 B-Wings. This is a very interesting ship, and the fact that it showed up here with this configuration is kind of surprising. You see, in the early years of the rebellion, the Alliance to Restore the Republic was simply just trying to survive. They were taking whatever starfighters they could get their hands on and deploying them and trying to outrun the Empire. And so for the fighter-bomber role, they would select the venerable BTLB Y-Wing used during the Clone Wars. They were available in large numbers in scrap yards and also in military surplus yards. The Rebel Alliance would slap some upgrades onto this Clone Wars design, and it served pretty well in its role as the main fighter-bomber utilized by the Rebel Starfighter Corps. Now, eventually the Rebel Alliance went from hardly surviving to actually carrying out a pretty legitimate war against the Empire. With more and more individuals joining their ranks, the Rebel Alliance now needed to tackle the larger problem of actually dismantling the Imperial military. One of the biggest obstacles to their victory was the Imperial-class Star Destroyer. Even though it had a lot of weaknesses in its design, it was still a 1.6 kilometer long city built out of Durasteel. These things were not easy to destroy. The leaders of the Rebel Navy realized that they would eventually have to find a way to destroy a few of these Star Destroyers. There were over 25,000 of them, and you can't just expect all of them to defect to the rebellion. And no matter how much momentum was on the Rebel Alliance's side, it just wasn't easy getting rid of these things. Other than the MC-80 cruiser, there were very few Rebel starfighters that could stand toe-to-toe with one of these massive ships and do damage to it. And even the Y-Wing's payload of proton torpedoes wasn't enough to take one of these things down, which is where the B-Wing enters the conversation. Whereas the Y-Wing was still considered a fighter and a bomber, the B-Wing was specifically designed as a heavy assault craft, as in its only job was to beeline it towards a capital ship and then try to destroy it with all the weapons on board. The prototype of this fighter, dubbed the B-6 Blade Wing, was designed by Mon Calamari engineer Quarry. The result of his first prototype was a relatively unique-looking fighter, which was made up of three major components: a cockpit, which was gyroscopically mounted at the tip of a cross-wing fuselage, which had a weapons cluster on the opposite end, making this a very confusing ship to fly. I mean, not only do you have to worry about three-dimensional space like all other pilots, you also have to know where the rest of the ship is in relation to your cockpit. This also made the B-Wing extremely hard to track. Now, the reason why they designed this prototype in this way is kind of ingenious. You see, the B-6 prototype put all of its attribute points into straight-line top speed. This is a ship that is designed specifically to make attack runs with limited agility and maneuverability and a desire to stay on target. The rotating body of the ship is designed to confuse pursuers and point defense weapons without having the ship deviate from its predetermined course. The other reason why you want this design is because of the proprietary composite laser beam on this thing. It's probably one of the most potent weapons you could place on a fighter of this size. It basically has 4 different laser beams that are funneled into one laser beam that creates this long, continuous stream of energy. During its initial test run during the blockade of Ibar, this weapon managed to penetrate multiple decks on an Architect's-class command cruiser and destroyed it very easily. It's pretty potent, but in order for this weapon to work, you do have to lock onto your target for a few seconds and stay on course. After the successful use of this ship during the blockade of Ibar, Bill Organa would take the B-6 prototype to Slane and Corporal, the manufacturers behind the B-19 Torrent starfighter utilized by the Grand Army of the Republic. They would agree to mass-produce this starship, and this would lead to the development of the ASF-01 B-Wing. Now, one of the things that didn't make it to the production model of the ship was the composite laser beam. Either it was too expensive, too difficult to maintain, or maybe just too expensive. We don't really know, but they axed it. Instead of having just one powerful weapon, the B-Wings that we see fighting during the Galactic Civil War were given an assortment of less powerful weapons, including multiple ion cannons, a R9X heavy laser cannon, auto blasters, along with proton torpedo launchers. Since the weapon cluster on the ship is also designed to be removed and modular, you can add other weird things onto it, or kind of awesome things onto it, like laser-guided bombs. What makes the New Republic sortie against the pirates on Aten so special was the fact that these B-Wings seem to be carrying that composite laser beam weapon we first saw in the prototype. It means that they eventually phased this weapon back into existence for one reason or another. And so after the T-65B X-Wings make their initial run on the pirate frigate, destroying all the topside gun emplacements, looks like the pirates forgot to turn their shields on, and they were surprised. The B-Wings then follow up and go for the kill. Their laser weapons are able to penetrate multiple decks, setting off several internal explosions in the ship, forcing the frigate to crash onto the surface of the planet. It's very interesting that the New Republic would actually configure some B-Wings to actually have this weapon, let alone use it against pirates. Remember, by this point in 9 ABY, most large pockets of Imperial forces had been destroyed. The galaxy was now at peace thanks to the Galactic Concordance Treaty. And what Imperial remnant factions remained were forced to keep their operations pretty limited and underground. I mean, even ISB officer Moff Gideon didn't have access to a full Imperial-class Star Destroyer. He used a light cruiser as his flagship. And so one has to wonder why the New Republic even has these capital ship hunting variants in their patrol formations. I mean, I imagine these B-Wings are completely useless in a dogfight and, pretty useless against smaller vessels. Even freighters are going to be able to dodge this laser beam probably. So one reason I came up with why the New Republic would have these type of B-Wings is that it allows you to have a huge amount of firepower in a completely, starfighter dominated group. I mean, this group did have a CR-90 Corvette, but in general, these are all very nimble, fast ships, quick hyperdrives, able to get in and get out. This is kind of the Rebel Alliance's MO, and I feel like the New Republic carries on that tradition of using starfighters where most factions would use capital ships. And you gotta think about it, it's much cheaper to operate 2 B-Wings than, say, a MC-80 cruiser. If we take a look at the deployment of these B-Wings from this point of view, then things start to make a lot more sense. This is not about using some kind of proprietary weapon system. It's about cost-saving measures. The New Republic faced the same problems the Empire did. They had too many systems to patrol and just not enough resources to cover it all. So creating a capital ship-killing starfighter really fits into kind of the strategy of just minimizing your costs all across the board. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of awesome content. As usual, my name is Alan, reminding you that my allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy. I'll see you next time.